let me ask you this: where or what about science and religion? Like, where is it the stickiest for you? Like, these don't mesh. Is it aliens? Is that like the most contradiction, or
Oh,
where in those do you find the
oh,
most
here's
contradiction?
here's a great one. I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah.
Um, creationism.
Mm-hmm.
Creationism. Do you think there were dinosaurs? Do you think evolution is real?
Yeah. Okay. So here's what I think the Bible is true. There's a number of ways I come to that conclusion, but it is one conclusion I've drawn. The Bible is true. And so in the Bible, have you ever read the creation account in the Bible?
I, when I was a little kid, and I don't really remember it now.
Yeah. Might ring a bell with the 7 days of creation. So it's like in the beginning,
First, it was
God made,
light.
yep, light. And then it kind of goes through, plants and animals. There's like land, plant, and all the other ones. I can't remember exactly their order. But so uh, this idea of um, making the world in 7 days versus, kind of the billions of years that the scientific community estimates. I think that I don't have a perfect answer. I don't know. It's one of those things where I think it could be a literal 7 days, and maybe that's how God worked it, and we're missing something in science. Or maybe it's a figurative 7 days, and God just worked out creation over time, is essentially what it's saying. And in that sense, it's not contradictory at all. So it's one of those things where I don't know. I could take a stand, but I don't think I need to know because it's not a crucial area for me. It could be either way. Uh, with
So,
with regards to evolution, I actually am in medical school right now, so I do study like biology and stuff a lot. So I find that to be a very fascinating area of science. Um, and I think evolution by natural selection via um, gene mutation in your DNA is honestly, I think it has some real obstacles to it being very credible. Uh, and there's just so much that we could say about that. I don't even know what's a good place to start. So I guess, yeah. What are your thoughts?
um, yeah, I mean, like, if I could boil everything down into like, just a sentence or something, like, I think the evidence is just overwhelming in the case of evolution over time
Yeah,
is a thing. Dinosaurs did exist.
yeah,
Like, do you believe in dinosaurs?
yeah,
Like, do you think dinosaurs were real?
yeah. I think dinosaurs are real. I mean, I think the fossil record is pretty clear that there were, some kind of species
Okay.
as we know
Okay.
dinosaurs. Um, but here's what I will say about evolution being super well established. So I think what's really well established is that there's a very consistent trend in organisms from like less complex to more complex. So there's like, when we think about the eye, for example, like you can look at each stage of what you would think of as eye development, and there's like a creature with kind of each stage of eye
Yes.
building up to what we see, which is, I think, like a very strong indirect evidence of this kind of natural progression. Uh,
Yes.
what else is there in evolution that is compelling and quote overwhelming evidence? What would you say?
If we're just talking about progression over time, we could talk about the whales having the bone for arms or whatnot that
Yeah,
eventually over billions of years like got smaller and smaller to the point like where we have like records of it being um, like I don't know some bigger body part to smaller over. We just have like a bunch of snapshots of it changing over millions of years to where whether it be a frog to a tadpole or a whale to something, it's like they had some kind of body part that was different over time, and it's over like a billion years, like kind of deal. Like I think the evidence for evolution through fossil records is like it's too much to just like write off and say like, well, this is just coincidental.
yeah.
Um, so
So
if you're asking me specifically for like what one is like
yeah,
right there, I'm not like super versed on that, but I
Yeah,
remember reading about the bones in whales, about how like whales like
yeah,
have like a baby like arm or something, and it's like there's definitely something there.
yeah. So, kind of where I sit with it is, a little bit of confusion because, like you say, this kind of gradual, like these very gradual changes in the fossil record would seem to me to indicate some sort of natural progression of evolution. But what I will say is something I think about more often with evolution is the natural selection by DNA mutation. So if you think about evolution as something that's happening by natural selection, the very mechanism by which it acts is mutations in DNA. And I think this is an area that's frankly horribly inadequate to explain evolution. So either, in my opinion, evolution is false or we don't understand it very well at all because DNA mutation is not powerful enough to create the changes we've seen in life over time. And what I mean by this is, do you know much about amino acids and proteins and things of that nature?
I know, yeah, I know a little bit. I've taken like Bio 1, Bio 2 and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't
So,
know. Before you go on, I will disagree and say that
sure.
um, from what everything I've understand studied, I don't agree with the statement that our like background in understanding like whatever you said before about how we don't have enough evidence
Yeah.
of the change over time on those specific things. Like I'm not going to be able to like reiterate like off the dome
Yes.
tonight about this is actually this, but like everything I'm seeing, like we do have there's a lot of literature and like scientific evidence that like this has occurred over time.
Hmm. So yeah, and just to clarify what I was saying, I'm not saying that there isn't fossil records that cover a progression of species. I'm agreeing that there is fossil record of this, but what I'm saying is that the mechanism that we can imagine this happening by, I mean, everything that it's based on, that is um, DNA mutation, doesn't work to explain evolution. So, and that's so crucial to evolution that if it doesn't make sense, then there is no evolution, or we don't really understand it at all because that's just fundamental to how evolution works is DNA mutation. So I agree with you that it's in the fossil record and that there's a lot of literature. There's a ton of studies evidencing this, but I'm saying that I don't think, as I currently understand it, that evolution by DNA mutation is possible. And there's a number of reasons for this, but one of them is that if you think about life on a cellular level, is like the largest. All life boils down to cells, and cells are made up of different structures, including proteins and amino acids. Amino acids are like little Lego building blocks that make up
Yeah,
proteins.
I know. Yeah.
Okay, so in when DNA mutates, uh, it basically transcribes into a different order of amino acids to create a protein. So the number of different proteins that there could be is astronomical because there's 20 different amino acids that can be in any different order. And what they've found is that the number of these proteins that like randomly generated proteins that will fold into a functional shape is like 1 in 10 to the 70th, which is truly an unfathomable number. I think I've heard that there's something like 10 to the 84th atoms in the universe. So 1 out of 10 to the 70th random strings of proteins is estimated to self form into a functional shape. And so what you're looking at is a number of mutations that would have to be in the genetic, in each stage of reproduction. The number of mutations is just strictly not powerful enough to create the amount of variation in life that we see. So there's something like 10 to the 40th generations of genetic reproduction estimated to have happened in the entirety of Earth's history. So if there's that many reproduction events and something like 10 to the 6 reproduction errors in each reproduction event, you're not even close to creating enough proteins to have a change. And so that's a really nitty gritty look. And there's a lot more ways to look at it, things like irreducible complexity. But on the whole, I think that DNA mutation is, in my opinion, at this point, just insufficient to explain evolution. And so I would say that there's other ways to look at uh, what we
Yeah.
see in the natural world.
That's it's. That's so funny. I have homework for Mark 115 for sure, but
Yeah,
I want to give you just a little bit of something to look at as far as it's just so pertinent to what you just said
yeah,
about the proteins folding.
yeah.
The Nobel Prize this year in 2024. Have you heard at all about what that was? It
Nope,
was
I
the
have
fact
not.
that it was gifted to two scientists. You can just type in, I'll just type in Nobel Prize 2024. You can just type in Nobel Prize 2024
Okay.
protein folding. And the Nobel Prize in chemistry of this year or last year was in that AI actually did every single calculation. You said it was 10 to the 40th, 10 to the 70th. We actually used AI to figure out every single one of those folds that you mentioned about how it was
Hmm.
like unfathomable.
Yeah.
We cracked, here it is. Machine learning cracked the protein folding problem. And we now know every single variation that could the computational protein design and protein structure prediction has been solved. So every single thing, the thing you mentioned about how it was like unfathomable that like all the different ways that protein could fold. You said you're pre-med, like you obviously have an understanding of this.
Hmm.
Um, we did last year, 2024. We figured out every single way that they can fold together and actually build um, a what we're going to have extreme advancements in medicine, in like drugs, in therapies, in like everything in general, because we did figure out every way that those proteins fold and interact in the ways that we could do it. Before we had to like blast them with radiation and then like use a mass spectrometer to fucking like see the way they folded, and now we used AI to literally accurately calculate every single way they fold, and we just basically like advanced like thousands of years. Harvard put out a study; it would take like 1,000 years of PhDs of 100 like 100 PhDs studying 24/7 to figure out every way these things fold. And we figured it out last year just by using like machine learning. And that's me as like a software engineer, like computer science, like very technical nerd, very
Yeah.
in tune with AI. Um, I like that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
it was just really funny you mentioned that about the protein
Yeah.
folding, and the Nobel Prize of 2024 was figuring out every way the proteins fold. So
That
yeah,
that is really interesting, and I will have to look at that, and I think I'll be really curious to see where that information leads. But just the brief perusal that I did right here, I just want to correct one thing. The AI structure predicts how a protein will fold. So this machine learning actually enables us to understand the number 10, 10 to the 1 and 10 to the 70th, because it doesn't predict. I mean, it would be impossible to predict every possible folding because it's an infinite number of possible permutations of amino acids. But what it can do is take a string of amino acids and predict how it will fold. And it's that prediction that allows us to say that only 1 in 10 to the 70th are able to fold into functional structures. So I think there's a slight nuance there, but I will definitely be looking into that.
I think I don't really fall into anything. I'm very confused, and my biggest gripes, obviously believe in Jesus, and believe in all that, but my biggest gripes is when it comes to like evolution, and then also life outside of Earth.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much evidence that there is other life in the universe, and then the evolution part. So
Yeah.
if we want to get like super nitty gritty and just like fall by the Bible, I'll
Yeah.
definitely read Mark 115. But it's like I guess that me being like such like a nerdy mathematical dude,
Yeah.
that is my biggest I guess conflict when it comes to like the strict Christian values. But
Yeah. That's I can relate to just like being conflicted over that for sure. And just one thought, I feel intellectually satisfied as a Christian who questions some things like evolution. So I've thought about it a fair bit. Maybe I've become brainwashed, but I would say uh, it's I would encourage you to have an open mind because I find just yeah. I can be very intellectually satisfied in Christianity. I can be a thinker and still be content. So,
Yeah. My dad's a dentist, like practicing dentist DMD, and he got his full like he went back to school recently and got his full theology degree. Like he is
oh really?
actually like
Oh wow.
yes, extremely like religious
Huh.
and
Interesting.
yes, yeah. So
I can't.
I obviously yeah, I come from like, you know, people who are like that, but like he went back and like, you know, got his theology degree and is like very religious in that sense. So it's like
Huh. Yeah.
I have a lot of conflict in my life as far as like being like super analytical like nerd like
Yeah.
studying
Right.
like I love school, I love math, I love like seeing the world for what it is, but then also like I do believe in like so much stuff. So I feel like I'm kind of in a gray area of what to believe. So it for me it's personally extremely hard
Yeah.
to to nail down one and just be like, okay, I'm a Christian. We're the only person in the world. Evolution's not real, like kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
which is what I feel a lot of, I don't know, a lot of churches would say. So it's like I'm kind of like in the middle. I'm in the whatever they call it, whatever
Yeah.
the saying is.
Yeah. Would just like to add that I kind of share what I personally think about evolution, but I don't think you need to agree with me on evolution to be a Christian. I think there's plenty of room for that. So please don't.
Dude, I love, dude. I wish more Christians are like you. Is your name Kenny? Is your
Yeah.
name really Kenny?
Yep.
Kenny from Minnesota?
Yep. You got it.
Wow, dude, I never would have thought that, like off
That's
rip,
pretty
that
funny.
this is what you were gonna go. I never would have thought you were like some Christian, like, you know, trying to pump like Jesus, like
Yeah.
you. That is good. You definitely got me to think, and I'll probably read the whole verse in Mark, but
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be great. Uh,
dude,
if there wasn't too much else to say, it's been a delightful conversation. Uh,
I've enjoyed it. It's
yeah.
better than seeing weirdos on here.
Yeah.
That's actually that's that's the most like significant like anything I've had on here. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
We kind of got into the nitty gritty of creationism, the Bible's claims about creation and evolution. And so I think with what I talked about in the introduction, this would fall under the science contradicting a natural world claim offered by a religion. And with this issue in particular, I think the question is, does the Bible literally prescribe a 7-day creation that conflicts with science? And more specifically, we kind of honed in on assuming that it does evolution and the natural world contradict this idea of creationism? So I really focused in on some concepts that I picked up from a video featuring a few scientists regarding the mathematical problems of Darwin and Darwin's theory, and I'll put that in the description below. But that's kind of where I got my numbers, and I don't have a good sense of how rigorous their research is. So that's a weakness. I'm not an expert on any of this. I assume my understanding will change over time, and that science will show me to be wrong in areas as we continue to learn more about the natural world. But the other thing I would say is that I don't know a lot about fossils and how that speaks to evolution. I know that there's some people who make their case against evolution entirely based on the fossil record, seeing that it's not cut and dried evidence for evolution. I would encourage you to look up the Cambrian explosion if that is something that interests you, but it's just not something I know enough about, and it's so prevalent in like research papers that without just claiming that they're lying, I don't know enough to say that that it doesn't support evolution. And so that's kind of an area that I just surrender, saying I really don't know about that. But the biology and the chemistry and the math are I think telling, condemning even for evolution. We'll see how well that statement holds up. But I think that as I look at the Bible and I look at the natural world, I do think evolution has a lot of problems. And so, anyways, we'll see how things go as I continue to chat on Monkey. But thanks for tuning in for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.